Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time you're consuming this little artifact of educational media. Again, I am Vic McInnes, your public speaking instructor, coming to you live on tape from my COVID-19 compound here in the heart of the lovely Grovetown, Georgia metro area, the Aiken Tech Outpost in Columbia County. And our lecture today is brought to you by Bookshelves. Bookshelves, making Zoom meetings more interesting all across the country. Okay, all right. Today we're going to be talking about the one thing that really sort of grabs everybody, that whenever I talk to anybody and say, hey, listen, why don't you want to take public speaking? Two words come out of everybody's mouth, and I'm going to use them one time here, and then we're going to never use these two words together again. I look at them and I say, why don't you want to take public speaking? And people go, I suffer from stage fright. Okay, so first of all, we're not going to talk about stage fright anymore. All right, that is going the way of the woolly mammoth. It's extinct in this class. What we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about performance apprehension. Now, I know performance apprehension is a real thing. It's been a real thing for millennia. Okay, Jerry Seinfeld used to tell a joke that there was a survey done where people were more afraid of public speaking than they were of dying, which means if you're at a funeral and you're giving the eulogy, the guy in the casket's slightly better off than you are. And I don't know if that was true about that survey, but I know that there was a survey done in the late 1980s where people actually said they were more afraid of public speaking than they were of burning to death. Okay? I want you to think about that for a minute. All right? So I'm aware that it's a thing, but what we want to talk about today is just sort of get our hands around it, sort of take a look at it more seriously, sort of understand it. Okay, here's another crazy statistic. In a survey that was done a couple of years ago, 60% of people said that they felt they experienced higher performance apprehension than the average person would. And for those of y'all who have taken statistics, 60% of people cannot be higher than average. All right? So stage fright is a misnomer, okay? So and let's tear into that and find out why that is. First of all, Cambridge Dictionary defines fear as strong emotions caused by a great worry about something dangerous, painful, or unknown that is happening or might happen, okay? Dangerous, painful, or unknown that is happening or might happen. The Oxford English Dictionary defines fear as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain, or a threat. So let's sort of look at that. Fear, okay? Pain, threat, dangerous, okay? I do not fear standing in front of an audience, even a hostile audience, because I know there's a relatively small percentage that is going to result in pain or physical injury or some sort of danger. You know what I am afraid of? I'm afraid of bears. Bears, big, brown, grizzly, black bears, they terrify me. And that's because way back when I was about 18 years old, my family was camping, my dad and I really were camping in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park for a week. My brother was getting married. We just decided it was a good time just to get the hell out of town, and so we went up to North Tennessee, East Tennessee, to go camping for a week. And while we're looking at one of those scenic overlooks that they have in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, where you just view down the valleys, out of nowhere, in front of the parking lot, there was this drop-off, but out of nowhere, this full-grown male brown bear, about all 1,300 pounds of him, comes lumbering up over the top and stands right in front of our car. Now, I was sitting at the steering wheel, and my father was sitting in the passenger seat, and I just sat there, and he said, my dad looked at me and said, don't do anything. If things get crazy, hit the horn, start the car, and just back away. And we're all sitting there. The bear's staring at us. We're staring at the bear. We're having a moment together, the three of us. And the bear sort of loses interest because he probably thought we might be tasty, but it'd just be too much work. And so he starts to walk off when this car pulls up next to us. Now, if you're from New Jersey, I apologize. I'm just reporting facts, not saying anything about New Jersey. These people from New Jersey pull up, and they look at the bear, and they start giggling, and they start throwing marshmallows onto the hood of their car. The bear sees this, probably more likely smells it, and then an 8 to 1,300-pound bear climbs up on the hood of their car and just crushes it. The suspension goes all the way down. We're like, my father and I are sitting there looking at each other like, what do we do? And about that time, a park ranger pulled up. He gets out with an air horn and a shotgun and hits the air horn several times, and the bear looks minorly annoyed and roams off. But the thing that impressed me at that instant was that bear was at the top of the food chain. I was not. And if I wanted to, there was nothing I was going to be able to do about it. So, and ultimately the outcome of this is that we were leaving. We told the park ranger that the bear had been very pleasant, very agreeable, nice sort, amiable sort, until these people started throwing marshmallows on the hood of their car. And he said, yeah, there's still a marshmallow on the hood of the car. I saw it. They're about to get a $350 ticket. And $350 in 1980 was a lot of money. Okay? So that's why I don't like people saying stage fright. I will say performance apprehension. Because performance apprehension isn't a bad thing. Okay? Because really what you're worried about is the outcome and the results of the speech you're giving. Okay? It's attention. It's anxiety. It's not fear. No audience is ever going to come after you physically. Okay? I've never seen that happen in one of my classes. Okay? In any event, whatever the name, whatever you call it, you still feel like you're going to throw up. I get that. I'm not minimizing that. But I do want you to put this in a little bit in perspective. Performance apprehension, not only does it eliminate the fear part, but it also extends it out. Now, a lot of us have played sports before. We've been musicians. We've played in a band. We've done any number of things where people are expecting us to perform in a certain manner and at a certain level. In this, the phrase performance apprehension now spans all of those instances. Okay? It covers all of it. I know we're all in quarantine. There's no sports. That's why all of us, I might not have watched all 10 hours or whatever it was, but The Last Dance, the 10-part documentary series on the 1997-98 Chicago Bulls season, their 6th national championship. It was mostly about Michael Jordan and what he did and how he maintained all, 6 not consecutive, but 6 years that he played. He took a year and a half off, but the 6 years that he played, he was playing at a level that nobody had really seen before. And one of the things you began to realize was that Michael Jordan had to have somebody he had to beat personally. He had to have a personal stake in it. There's a thing where he's playing quarters with his security staff, where he's betting $20 that he can get the quarter closer. I mean, he talks about his gambling issues. And as he says in an interview with Ahmad Rashad, I don't have a gambling issue because I can pay my bills. I don't have a gambling issue. I have a competitiveness issue. And you saw him repeatedly over and over again where they would be struggling, where the Bulls would be playing poorly, where he wasn't playing up to his potential. And then somebody would just piss him off. And in the 98 playoffs, it was Karl Malone, arguably the best player that's ever played for the Utah Jazz. Karl Malone, he had food poisoning. He was just tired. He was exhausted. Jordan just did not want to play. And then Karl Malone said something to him, and it just pissed him off. And that increased that desire, that apprehension about losing to this guy. And Jordan turned in some of his best games ever, even though he was not physically at his peak. He was able to get up for the game like that. Charles Barkley, good friend of Michael Jordan, Auburn alumni, one time said about their betting, said, yeah, we bet $5,000 on a putt because if we don't have something at stake, we don't play very well. Okay? So we want to start at this point fairly early on in this lecture to turn from focusing on, hey, performance apprehension is a negative to performance apprehension can be a positive. And we're going to talk about that. So let's go to the slides. So this is our general, and I'm not, again, our public speaker here is well aware of performance apprehension. He is experiencing things we all experience. And yes, even after doing this, teaching this for coming up on 34 years, I still feel every single one of these things. Okay, and we're going to talk about these symptoms right off the bat. So first of all, there's 2 types of symptoms. There's physical symptoms, and you're going to see increased heart rate. You're going to see shakiness. shaking in your hands, your knees. You're going to feel like your legs are just going to give out. Alternately, at the same time that you're shaking and your hands are shaking, your arms feel like they're locked in place because of the tense muscles. You have a dry mouth. At the same time, you're sweating in places you didn't know you could sweat that much from. And what I'm talking about here is the palmar surfaces, or the palm of your hands, and the soles of your feet. There's a sweat gland there that is only tied to nervousness and not to body temperature control. Okay, so you'll get sweaty, and I've had people report to me that they were wearing shoes and they were just amazed. They didn't have on socks, and they were amazed at how sweaty the soles of their feet got. Okay, so that's something we all need to be aware of. Now, as far as the cognitive or the mental symptoms, you may have feelings of apprehension. We've already seen from since we all listen to Amy Cuddy this week, Dr. Cuddy, we all know that sometimes our bodies can tell our mind and our emotions what to think. And if your body is suddenly experiencing all these physical changes, okay, you're going to try to come up with an emotional explanation. So we're going to feel all these changes, so we're going to begin to feel, we associate these feelings with fear, so we're going to start communicating that we're feeling fear. We're going to start talking to ourselves because we're feeling these negative, what we interpret as negative physical manifestations. We're going to start negatively talking to ourselves about how, oh my God, I'm going to do, this is just going to be, I'm going to puke in front of everybody. And let me say this real quick. Been doing this since 1986, and I've never had a student throw up in class. Not once, not ever. Okay? Suddenly, we'll feel like we have a lack of self-confidence because we know we're not going to be able to pull this off because we're so physically out of sorts. And then we experience massive self-doubt. Okay? Simply because our bodies are telling us something's wrong, we interpret the changes our body's going through just to make that make it all make sense to us. Okay? But let's talk about, right off the bat, we're going to start debunking some myths about performance apprehension. Okay? First of all, people who suffer more performance apprehension are naturally neurotic. That is false. Okay? People who suffer performance apprehension are completely normal. There is a study that, from going back to my days as a polygraph examiner and a federal agent, there were studies that sociopaths, people who experience sociopathy, people who are serial killers and mass murderers, don't feel performance apprehension because they don't feel those emotional changes. So it is completely normal, and it doesn't mean you're insane if you experience what you perceive to be a high level of performance apprehension. Number two, confident people don't suffer from performance apprehension. That, again, is false. Everyone suffers from performance apprehension. People who don't suffer from performance apprehension aren't confident, they're boring. Okay, everybody has seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ben Stein has got the best role in there. He's the history professor. The guy that stands in front of him, Bueller. That's a guy with no performance apprehension. We've all had those professors that are lecturing off the same lecture notes they've been using since John Kennedy was president of the United States. They just don't care. That's not confidence. That's apathy. Okay? 3, telling a joke is a good way to begin a speech. We're going to talk about a lot of different ways to start a speech, and we're going to talk about a lot of different what we call attention devices. But I will tell you this. Nothing is going to derail you from a speech as quickly as if you tell a joke and it goes horribly wrong. If you're expecting everyone to laugh and nobody laughs, that's going to set you back. So people will tell you, hey, get over your performance apprehension, tell a joke and lighten it all up. That's not necessarily going to work for you. That's something you're going to have to figure out on your own. Okay? Number 4, there are hacks to beating performance apprehension. That is also false, okay? All of them. I've heard them all. Think of your audience as sitting there naked, which there's a lot of people we don't need to see naked. First of all, let's just get that out of the way. Number 2, that's just going to distract you and negatively impact the way you give your speech. Have a couple of shots of alcohol. Another really bad idea, because then you're going to be drunk and apprehensive and not just apprehensive. Okay, drink a lot of water. Then you're going to be apprehensive and need to go to the bathroom really bad. Okay? In fact, when I asked the class, usually about 2/3 of the classes, when I ask for symptoms as opposed to give them symptoms, they come up with, I got to pee real bad, which we professionals call urinary urgency. Okay? If you've drunk 3 quarts of water before you give a speech, what do you think you're going to feel like when you're standing up there giving a speech? Okay? So there are no quick hacks to get around it. We are going to tell you a way to get around it, to deal with it, though, better at the end of the lecture. Okay? One mistake means you've blown it. You will hear yourself. I had a student stop giving a speech because she saw a little spit fly out of her mouth, and it freaked her out. Okay, and she assumed everybody had seen it. And when I went back and sort of asked the class if they had, nobody had noticed. Okay, we'll talk about what the audience sees and perceives a little bit later. Okay, but the last two that are really this avoid it by writing your speech out word for word and memorizing them. We're going to talk about the 4 methods of presentation, and writing your speech out, reading a manuscript can work in certain circumstances, but memorizing is a horrible, horrible idea if you can avoid it. Why? What happens if you're experiencing performance apprehension and you get distracted and you completely lose your spot? That's only going to make your sense of self reproach even greater. Okay, so you got to get rid of that. Don't write your speech out word for word, and we're certainly not going to be doing that in this class. Now, the last two are 2 of the biggest ones. Audiences are out to get you. False. Okay, audiences generally, research have proven, want you to succeed as a speaker because it means they're involved in a successful event. The audience has a stake in you succeeding. I don't care what the circumstances are. I mean, if it's a really angry audience, they're at least there to hear you. Okay? So the audiences are not out to get you. And certainly in class, the people who will be watching your videos are not out to get you. Finally, the audience can see how nervous you are. Again, false. Most people report that as I've already said, most people report that they suffer a higher than average performance apprehension. Most people feel that they suffer significant performance apprehension. All those things that you're really worried about, the shaking knees, the shaking hands, the quivering voice, we can't see that because we're not looking for it. I rarely, if ever, even though I am looking for those things, are able to see them. The other stuff like heart rate, dry mouth, sweaty palms, nausea, none of that, urinary urgency, none of that is going to be visible to an outside viewer. Okay? Here's the other thing I want you to remember. Okay? This is from E.R. Robinson, and E.R. Robinson was one of those guys that we talked about, during modeling that did a ton of research in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And what he found was, through statistical research, people who reported high levels or moderate levels of performance apprehension actually were better speakers. In fact, he came to the conclusion that the complete absence of feelings of apprehension is neither normal or a desirable effect. Okay, excuse me there. So we need a performance apprehension. If you're not experiencing performance apprehension before a speech, there's something seriously going on there that we need to talk about. But let's talk about some of the causes. The first type of cause is going to be biological. Okay, I want you to jump back in the Wayback Machine with me, and I want you to go back about 40,000 years. Okay, when humans, Homo sapiens like us first started walking the earth. You got to remember that we were not at the top of the food chain. There were saber-toothed tigers, there were big, huge wolves, there were any number of things that would eat us. Okay, so we had to develop biologically a process to deal with those things. So you're walking through the steps and you see a saber-toothed tiger. You've got 3 options. You can prepare to fight the saber-toothed tiger. You can try to run from the saber-toothed tiger. Or you can try to freeze and let the saber-toothed tiger walk past you. That is called fight, flight, freeze. And our body begins to adjust to all 3 of those things. This is not voluntary. This is not anything you have control over. It's programmed into our DNA. Okay? A lot of things happen. The adrenal gland secretes adrenaline. The pancreas releases huge quantities of sugar. The spleen releases a ton of red blood cells to carry more oxygen to the muscles. The pulse increases. The heart muscle and brain responsiveness begins to increase. Okay? All the blood begins to, because if you're going to get in a fight, you need to pool all your blood in your core organs. So the blood is going to come rushing out of your extremities, your arms and your legs, and into your core. So your hands are going to get really cold, a lot of people report, and yet they're still going to be really sweaty. Okay? Those palmar surfaces of the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet are going to get really sweaty in order either to A, climb better, hold a weapon better, or to give you better traction to run. Okay, you're going to start breathing quickly in short breaths in order to maximize the amount of oxygen in your system at any time. Okay, or you're going, and that also helps you to, if you freeze, to start breathing short, shallow breaths are much quieter than, I mean, if you're sitting there going, as opposed to going, it allows you to hide better. Okay, and all these things are preparing you to go toe to toe with something that could eat you. And then we plop you down in front of 30 people and say, don't move your feet. It's a contradiction that we have to deal with. But the other thing you need to think about is brain processing. The average brain processes at about 400 words per minute. 400 words per minute. We speak at about 150 words per minute. So naturally, there's a 250 word per minute difference between what I can speak and what I can think. So you've got 250 words a minute rattling around in your head, okay, on a normal moment. Then you dump in all that sugar, all that oxygen, all that adrenaline, and your ability to process words can grow as high as 600. It can go up by over 50, in some cases 75%. So now you've gone from 250 spare words a minute to almost 500 spare words a minute. And what do you do with those 500 words a minute? You freak out and convince yourself with them that you're having a horrible time. Okay? You just sit there and you go, okay, I'm giving my speech. I'm doing fine. Everything's fine. Why is he writing things? And then you realize that those 500 words a minute have overtaken the 150 words a minute you're trying to speak, and you've forgotten how to talk. Okay? It does happen. It's completely normal. Remember, the biological aspects are all part of the evolutionary process that we can't do anything about them, so don't take it as a failing on your personal part. You just need to relax and go with it. The second thing that can cause performance apprehension is previous experiences. And I say that because, as I say here, middle school English teachers are horrible, horrible people. Okay? We take someone, and again, let's all get together and agree that some of the worst people in the world are middle schoolers. All right? They're horrible people. The worst time I had in raising two very strong, very opinionated young women that are my two daughters was in middle school, because middle schoolers are horrible. They're terrible. So what you're going to do is you take someone that is going through puberty, their voice is changing, they're at their highest level of body discomfort, and you stick them in front of a group of people and tell them to do an oral book report. It's just a horrible time to do it. Okay? Previous bad experiences like that, if that's the only time you ever did public speaking before, it will ruin public speaking. In my church in Tampa, down in Tampa, Florida, my daughter, who was I think 10 or 11 at the time, I don't remember which, came walking in. She was coming from Sunday school and met us in the sanctuary, and she's got a piece of paper. And I'm like sitting there going, what is that? She's going like, well, apparently I'm doing the Bible reading today. And I went, well, when did you find out about it? Because I was going to be a little annoyed, because I've always told my kids that, hey, listen, I do this professionally. If you're going to give some sort of a public speech, talk to me about it so that we can practice it. I said, when did you hear about this? And she said, the lady, who will remain nameless, handed it to me just a minute ago. And I looked at it and I said, and it was, of course, from the King James, which was words in there that nobody ever speaks anymore. And I looked at it and I said, are you going to be okay reading that? I don't want you to do it if you're not comfortable. She goes, I don't know what some of these words are. And I said, so do you want to do it? And she goes, I'd really rather not. And I said, okay, give it to me. And I walked up, found the lady, and I said, hi. Yeah, first of all, number one, if you're going to ask my 10 or 11-year-old to speak in front of a group, I would appreciate it if you talk to me first. Second of all, she's not doing this. And the lady, to be honest with you, got a little upset with me. And she said, well, why not? And I said, she's 11 years old. She's never really done public speaking before. And I'm not going to have a bad experience be her first experience. And she said, well, it won't be a bad experience. The people love her and it'll all be fine, and Jesus and everything else. And I'm like, I don't care. She's not doing it because we haven't had a chance to prepare. And taking a kid like that and sticking them in front of a group of old people and telling them to read something like the King James version of the Bible is just not it's not going to happen. It can ruin her for speaking in public, and that's just not going to happen. By the way, that daughter, my youngest, Colleen, wound up being the captain of the Mississippi State debate team. So we managed it, and she did very well and now very comfortable with public speaking. Okay, so your previous experiences can have an impact, and everybody's got a bad previous public speaking experience. Mine was a 8th grade middle school English book report that the only reason I took public speaking in high school was the only thing I hated more than public speaking was PE. And PE in high school, taking public speaking in high school got me out of PE, so I got out. That's why I am where I am today. Third thing that can be a cause is what we're going to call level of skill. People have this dumb idea that if we talk, we can publicly speak, because basically, isn't it just talking? As we've already said in our very first lecture, no, public speaking is not talking in front of people. Okay? Think about this. Okay? If you are a middle school music teacher and you grabbed a kid out of your music appreciation class that has never played an instrument before, you give them a bass saxophone and says, you're going to have a solo. And then you look at them, at your teacher, and say, I've never played an instrument before. They're going to go, it's okay. You listen to music. You'll be fine. They would fire that teacher. And yet we consider that to be normal, acceptable behavior for public speaking. So planning for an event and learning how to develop an event and learning how to prepare for an event and learning the mechanics of public speaking helps to minimize the apprehension associated with it. Okay? So let's talk about some of those mechanics, the way we work through it, some coping techniques. First of all, develop a communication versus a performance view. Okay? The performance view is they're going to approve or disapprove of how I deliver the message. They're going to be looking at me to criticize me and to criticize the way I do it. Communication says, I'm here to tell people things. I'm here to inform them, to persuade them, to entertain them. And that really gives you the perspective that you're communicating the information is more important than their immediate view of you. Is it important, like we talked about last week with ethos and all that good stuff? Yeah, absolutely. But really, you need to focus on the communication, what information you're attempting to impart, than you are about the way they're viewing the way you do it. Second of all, do some relaxation techniques. Excuse me. If you Google relaxation techniques, you're going to find a million of them online. Many of them are very good. There's a breathing technique that I sometimes use where I inhale and hold the breath for 4 seconds and then exhale over 3 seconds. That's a very simple technique. I also do, I learned it as a self-hypnosis technique for one of the wacky jobs I've had in the past where they thought that was appropriate, where you start actively relaxing your toes, then you relax your feet, then you relax your heels, then your ankles, then you work all the way up to the top of your head. It takes about 15 minutes. And it really calms me down if I know I'm going into a significant performance of any sort of communication event, like a job interview or something like that. If I can do that, it helps calm me and relax me, so I get control of that 250 words a minute floating around in my head that I'm not speaking. The other thing that most people don't do because they feel it's, why would I stand up there quietly? Remember that when you're all the biological things kick in, your sense of time can get a little wacky. So I used to have people stand up, and in the middle of the speech, I would stop. I would say stop, and I would say when I said stop, they were instructed to stop for 10 seconds. Most people would start talking again anywhere from 3 to 6 seconds later. So a lot of people, when I say this, they freak out. And I say, when you get up in front of the audience, plant your feet, look at your notes, look at the audience, and take a deep breath. People will say, well, they'll think I'm stalling. No, actually, the reaction to that is they think you're getting your thoughts together so you can do a better job. Okay? So that take a second after you stand up and take a deep breath is a relaxation technique that I think works really well. So there's this thing called cognitive restructuring that isn't really in vogue anymore, but I still think if you're having severe performance apprehension, it's a good idea. What cognitive restructuring involves involves one thing. You write down every single one of the things you're afraid of. Okay, all of them. I'm going to throw up. I'm going to have an accident. I'm gonna have a urinary urgency accident. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to my knees are going to buckle and I'm going to fall down. I'm going to forget how to speak my native language. Okay, you write all those things down and then you go through them one by one and ask yourself, what are the real possibilities that this is going to happen? And I will tell you, everything everybody's afraid of, there's zero possibility. If you follow the techniques that we teach and the methods we teach in this course, there is zero chance that any of the things that you're afraid of are probably going to happen. Okay? But you got to listen to what I'm teaching in the course. Because I'm going to get up there, I'm going to throw up. Like I said, I've never seen anybody throw up. I'm going to pass out. Never had anybody pass out. My knees are going to buckle and I'll fall down. Never had anybody do that. Never happened even once. I'll forget what I'm going to say. You know what? That has actually happened before. But if you listen to what we're going to do, okay, and what we talk about in this course, you will have notes so that if you have a complete brain lock, you can look down at your notes and you can move forward. And one of the techniques I'm going to get to in just a second will also help with that. Analyze the audience. The better you know the audience, the less intimidating they are. So do your homework and we'll talk about audience analysis for a whole hour in a couple of weeks, okay? Knowing you've prepared for that specific audience will help you feel better when you get up there to speak to them. And finally, keep your organization simple and specific. It'll make for better, cleaner, easier to read cards, okay? It will, having a simple outline will keep you from wandering around during the speech, because I have had people just start and stop in the middle of the speech and go, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm way off my outline. I need to bring it back to my outline, okay? Having a simple organization will help you stay focused, okay? And the best way to overcome your apprehension is to move through the speech in an organized fashion. And then finally, training is a good coping technique. Get people to teach you how to do public speaking. Okay, you guys are here doing that now. But take another public speaking course if you get the chance. Join Toastmasters or any number of other public speaking organizations that will help you with that. Okay, so, all right. Here's the trick. I told you up front that I was going to teach you something today that was going to help you. And that wasn't a hack, but it would help you getting through performance apprehension. Let me take it off slides for a minute. Go back to the camera. Okay. Ooh, there I am, camera. Okay. All right. I both love and hate horror movies. I really do. The first real horror movie I went to see was when I was a freshman in high school. I saw Psycho, which was, I don't know, maybe a 14-year-old student watched Psycho. It was the 70s. We did stuff in the 70s that were just crazy. Okay. First date I went on was the original Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, with Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance. Okay. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with horror movies. One of the best movies I've ever seen, Blair Witch Project. That scared the poop out of me. I mean, that movie had me upset for days. I described it to my wife and I said, we should go see it. You'll love it. And she's like, nope, not going to go see it. Okay. Remember about horror movies. What doesn't happen in a horror movie? Well, in a horror movie, you usually get this thing where right off the bat, if you think about Halloween, and if you want to go back and watch the 1978 John Carpenter's the original Halloween, it's really not all that terrible. It's not like Friday the 13th Part 42 where you're killing somebody every 3 minutes. There's only 4 people die in the whole movie. But what that does in a 90-minute movie, John Carpenter understands that. In the first 5 minutes, he kills somebody. Bam! I mean, it's like, wow! Okay? Then nothing happens for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes. There's a long space where you're calm. And then he begins to ramp up the tension. And the tension grows. And then, bam! And then the tension goes away for another 15 minutes. And then he brings it back up again. It's bam! One more time. And you're like, and then he lets it go again. And then for the climax of the movie, he keeps it going for about 5 or 10 minutes. Okay? Horror movies don't work if there's just nothing but it's coming at you all the time. You can't sustain that level of stress. You can't sustain that level of fear. I want you to remember that as we're talking, and you've seen horror movies where it's just somebody getting slashed and chopped up and thrown into a wood chipper every 3 minutes. And they get tedious. Okay? Want you to remember that as we begin to talk about the stages of performance apprehension. Okay? So these are the stages of performance apprehension. First of all, is the pre-presentation phase, the anticipation phase. Now, the anticipation phase is ill-defined at best, okay? I know people who have, that's that sort of feeling of a great Yiddish word for it is agita, where you're just feeling verklempt, where you're feeling a little upset. I had somebody tell me that that anticipation phase for them lasted 2 years. Okay? Every time they would look and see that they had to take a public speaking course, they felt nauseous. Okay? And I don't deny that that was absolutely true. Okay? I know people that when they signed up, they said when they signed up for the class, they had trouble breathing. Okay? I get that. Certainly. There's those several minutes when you begin to realize when I'm walking into a big event and I know that I'm going to be speaking in front of a large group of people, the anticipation phase, if there's a dinner, as soon as we start and we begin to get into the program, if there's a dinner before, as soon as dinner's done, I start feeling that anticipation phase. Okay? That's fine. That's good. That's productive. Okay? You should embrace that. That is actually showing you that you're ready and that you're going to have energy and you're going to do it. Okay? Then you get up there and we call that confrontation. That's when all of those physiological and cognitive issues kick in. Okay, your palms are sweaty, you're nauseous, you can't breathe, you got sweat pouring out of everywhere, your knees are shaking, your hands are shaking, you're like wondering why that guy is writing those things down and why is he picking at his teeth when you're trying to give a speech. But here's the trick. That's only going to last for a minute or two. I mean, literally, your body, without the input of additional stressors, your body cannot maintain that level for more than about 2 minutes, 3 at the max. It's going to begin to dissipate, and that's when we hit adaptation. Okay? And adaptation is where all that physiology and all those cognitive functions begin to return to normal. Now, I had took a class when I was a contractor over at Fort Gordon, had to take a class on instructional techniques, okay? And I gave this, and there was a lady in our class, V, came in, didn't see me do it, but everybody in the class saw her at 2.5 minutes go from that confrontation phase. She was literally sitting there. Her voice was quivering. Her hands were a little shaky. But at that 2.5 minute mark, she started, her vocal rate slowed. Her tone dropped almost a full octave, okay? Her volume dropped. Her hands became more open and she became more relaxed in her gestures, okay? And everybody walked up to me afterwards and said, man, it was 2 minutes and 38. I mean, people have been timing to see if it would happen. Once you get into that adaptation phase, you're going to begin to relax. Now, here's the other cheat, okay? You'll get into adaptation quicker the more public speaking you do. All right? You hopefully, remember E.R. Robinson, getting rid of the confrontation stage is neither normal nor desirable. So you're always going to have that confrontation phase. That's fine. Okay? That's desirable. But the more public speaking you do, the quicker adaptation will kick in. And the quicker and the steeper that slope to adaptation will be to your return to normalcy. Okay? So those are the 3 stages of performance apprehension: anticipation, confrontation, and adaptation. Okay? So some specific things to do that will help you prepare. Spend a lot of time, because you're going to be nervous if you get up and you find out. If you're standing in front of people and you know that you're not prepared, guess what? You're going to be more apprehensive about that speech. Practice out loud and do it in front of a group of people if you can. Whenever I had speeches to give, I would always practice in front of my wife and 2 daughters, and that was as hostile an audience as you might ever find. Practicing in front of family members is hard as hell, okay? But if you can give a good speech in front of them, you're good to go. You can do it in front of anybody. Dress appropriately. We're going to talk about dress a little bit more when we talk about nonverbal communication. Well, no, let me tell you right now. I'll get to you. Let me get to that in a second when we finish this so I can go back to the camera. We've already seen Amy Cuddy. We know that if we stand in a relaxed posture, if we keep our hands from in front of us, if we don't take on a defensive posture, which I will talk to you about in our next lecture, if we don't have that defensive posture, we won't feel defensive eventually. So let your nonverbals convince yourself. Focus on your message, not on any immediate audience reactions. And again, we're going to talk about audience analysis and feedback and everything else, but remember, you're there to give a message, not to monitor what the audience is doing. And remember, through the stages of performance apprehension, it's going to get better soon. Okay? 2 minutes. You get through those first 2 minutes without falling over dead, you're home free. Okay? All right, so let me talk to you about dress appropriately real quick as a way to deal with it. I'm not a person that believes that performance apprehension or, you should dress a certain way or anything else. But what I will tell you, I don't have requirements for dressing as long as it's appropriate. I mean, I haven't had anybody get up and try to do a speech in inappropriate attire. But what I will say is that I have, let me just put it like this. Take a little story. In 2009, I was interviewing for a job. It was a supervisory intelligence officer job. I had to go to D.C. I was living in Tampa working at U.S. Special Operations Command. I had to fly to New York for some interviews, or fly to Washington, D.C. for some interviews. And I landed, and I had to go over to this office this agency had and get my hotel room assignment, get transportation over to the hotel. I took the metro to the office. Walked in wearing an old golf shirt, a pair of ratty cargo pants that had been on 2 deployments already, a pair of hiking boots that had seen better days, an old fleece that had been on those same 2 deployments. Here's my theory of dressing on an airplane. If I'm going to slam into a mountain at 600 miles an hour, I'm going to be wearing comfortable clothes. I'm not going to be uncomfortable. Okay, so I go walking in, and I drop my suitcase, and I walk up to the receptionist. Hi, I'm Vic McInnes. I'm here to pick up my hotel room assignment and to get transportation over to the hotel. And she said, "Oh, Mr. McInnes, it is so good that you were here. Our 3 o'clock interview canceled, so they were just going to go ahead and do your first interview today." There were 4 separate interviews as part of getting this job. And I looked at her and I went, "Excuse me?" She said, "Yeah, you're going to do your first interview today." And I said, "Which interview is this?" And she says, "Oh, it's the professional technical interview." And I'm like going, I really don't want to do that. She's going like, "Why not?" And I said, "I'm not prepared for an interview. I just got off a flight. I'm not dressed for an interview. I really would rather not do that." And she goes, "Well, I'll go in and ask." And she came back out a couple of minutes later, and they've all said, "Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You're going to do the interview at 3:15. Fine. So I go in, and there's 4 people on this interview panel, 2 government senior executives, and 2, an Air Force and an Army colonel. And they're all wearing, the civilians are wearing suits and ties, the military people are wearing their dress uniforms with all their decorations, and there I am wearing an old GI surplus fleece, a ratty old golf shirt, and a pair of cargo pants that had holes in them. And I'm like sitting there, first thing I did was I walked in and I said, "Gentlemen, First thing off, I never started an interview with apologizing, but I'm going to apologize because I did not know I was going to be doing an interview today. I dressed for a flight. I dressed for comfort. I'm really embarrassed about the way I'm dressed. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. We won't even consider that. That's not something we even consider. And even though they were very nice about it, guess what I was thinking about during that entire interview? Yeah, I was thinking about the way I was dressed. Apparently, I did pretty good because I got the job, and I bumped into several of the people I interviewed. Two of the people that were in that panel, and they said I was fantastic. Okay, which is neither here nor there. They may have just been being nice to me and lying to me because they needed something from me. I don't know. But all I could think about was the way I was dressed. So when we talk about attire, wear something that you're not going to be worried about what you're wearing. Okay, because your attire can add to your performance apprehension needlessly. So for this class, if you feel like you need to turn your camera on and be wearing a suit and tie, wear a suit and tie. If you're okay with wearing, well, again, let's keep it appropriate, but shorts and a t-shirt, fine, shorts and a t-shirt. Okay? Your dress should not contribute to your performance apprehension. Okay, that's it. That's performance apprehension. Remember the two words we're never going to call it. Okay, said that right up front. You'll get another lecture on nonverbal communication and delivery in the next day or two. That will, again, we're sort of putting this on. We're now beginning to build. We went over some stuff earlier. Those first two chapters are sort of, ethics and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's fine. But now we're doing the mechanics. Performance apprehension is our first step in really dealing with the mechanics of giving a public speech. Okay? All right, we will hit that very soon. Look for that lecture coming up. Until then, stay safe. Send me an email if you need to talk to me. Stay well, and we will see you soon.